If you're watching this program on TV, then, well, you're in the minority. Social media and content platforms like YouTube have fundamentally changed the way we interact with the media, especially for younger generations of digital natives. Are media business models adjusting to the changes in consumption quickly and effectively enough? Václav Štětka, a media researcher from Loughborough University, gives us this brief overview of how commercial outlets in Central and Eastern Europe try to adapt to this new reality. Take a listen.
Purely ad-based model is no longer sustainable in the face of the domination of the global digital platforms. So many commercial online outlets have introduced some form of partially paid model, freemium models, some of them even premium. And they are basically all trying to build their subscription base. The problem is that the culture of paying for online news has not been fully developed in Central and Eastern European region. If you look at the data from international surveys, such as the Reuters Digital News Report, it is quite clear that only a small minority of people in Central and Eastern European countries are willing to pay for online news. It's between 10 to maximum 15%, depending on the country, but that's below the European average, and in a stark contrast to especially Nordic countries, where you see 30% of people or more paying for online news. I think I should also mention that quite a lot of commercial media are experimenting with other formats of delivery of news in the digital environment. I'm talking particularly about podcasts, which have sort of mushroomed over the last couple of years in many Central and Eastern European countries. Podcasts have really established themselves as a very sort of new, funky way of delivering news content.
To discuss the ways in which media and journalists find audiences and funding in the digital age, as well as the impact of emerging tools like AI, we welcome Aleksandra Bielakowska, the Asia Pacific Advocacy Manager at RSF, Reporters Without Borders in Taipei, and Irene J. Liu, the AI Emerging Tech and Regulation Director at the International Fund for Public Interest Media. Irene, I want to start with you. Your organization emphasizes sustainable growth, which means that media outlets can't rely on your funding forever. Now, can you give us some examples of successful business models that you've seen through your work?
Sure. I think it varies very much by region and also type of media. But I think that what we've seen in terms of successful work towards viability and long-term sustainability are organizations that have diversified their funding. So, if you are a nonprofit organization that has relied very heavily on grant funding, philanthropy, development aid, moving into events, or also to really building membership, developing those connections, building a monetization strategy online. Those are ways that are really, really valuable. And also thinking through advertising, right? And how you build in the safeguards editorially, but also still think commercially as well. To me, and to what we've seen thus far, is that there is no one silver bullet solution for journalism. It really, the factors that really make a difference are: one, you know what you do; two, you have the marketing chops to be able to convey what your value proposition is and why what you do is valuable and useful to your users and your audiences. And then also that you can communicate that to those who might be supportive of your work, right? So that includes commercial, it includes philanthropies, it includes grants and others. More and more, I think that's kind of the status quo. As we move into a increasingly AI mediated environment, where people are accessing information through generative AI, that moves us into a completely different conversation, which I'm very happy to have here, but we could also spend 3 days talking about it nonstop, because that, to me, I think that we're heading into an inflection point where the technology is either going to move us into a state where we see the extinction of legacy media as we know it and that model, or we can potentially conceive of a newly considered information environment. But it requires a very, very different level of collaboration within the industry, and also engagement with regulation, with technology, and also with users and how they access information.
Well, I do want to stay on that topic since you brought it up. So AI tools are, of course, or can be a boon to journalists, but they are also seemingly transforming the behaviors of media and news consumers. People are now turning to AI tools to get information, to get the news from around the world. So what kind of impact, like you mentioned extinction of legacy media, what are we going to see in its place? What can we expect in the coming years and months?
So I didn't say that it is guaranteed that it will be an extinction event for media. I think that if the media industry doesn't think of itself in a different way and really take this opportunity and engage in it now, it could potentially become an extinction event. And what I mean by that is increasing what we are seeing, as you mentioned, Tomasz, is that people are going to the technology to ask for information directly. If you look at the trends in the Reuters digital news report and others, especially with young people, especially in global South countries, what we are seeing is that people are going directly to new platforms for information, and they're not only going to Google and Facebook and WhatsApp and others media companies on these platforms. Increasingly on platforms such as TikTok, people are going directly to ordinary people for news content. So they are completely bypassing the institutions of professionalized journalism and seeking information that they trust from people, right? And I think that this is really an important critical, because it varies by country, but it reflects on issues of trust in media. It reflects on the business model. It reflects on how news is delivered to people, that I think are existential questions that media companies need to really face. Then, putting aside all of this, when you talk about the fact that people are going to these technologies to ask questions and not going directly to the source, whether it's ChatGPT and a chatbot, or whether it's a audio device like a Siri or an Alexa, what is happening is that very, very carefully honed reader revenue model that many big media companies are now depending on, whether you're talking about subscription or otherwise, suddenly the media company doesn't have a direct relationship with the user anymore. So then that business model is also going to continue to deteriorate. We have seen around the world that referrals to media websites is going down, whether you're talking about search engines or whether you're talking about social media. The technologies are not leading people to go directly to the website. And if you don't have that direct connection as a media organization, then that means that you can't monetize that relationship, which again is another critical kind of inflection point for the business model of journalism.
Well, we're slowly running out of time, but before we go, I do want to raise the issue of AI tools for journalists. Aleksandra, you mentioned in our previous conversation that RSF is working on a prototype AI tool for journalists. How would that differ from commercially available tools like ChatGPT that we just mentioned?
The most important thing is that it's a tool for journalists, built by the journalists. And the Spinoza project was an initiative that RSF has launched in collaboration with its partner, Journal Information Press Alliance, from France, the project that we also want to develop internationally. But first, it was built as a prototype, I would even say in an experiment, born from the desire among journalists and publishers to make themselves familiar with the generative AI. This project aimed to reach journalists by creating an AI tool based on reliable databases, which can be considered still quite small. And the current version includes scientific reports, legislative text, and over 3,000 articles published by the French press since 2022. As it's the first experiment, we wanted to focus on a specific topic, and this topic was the helping journalists on research on climate change. And this tool provided them a means of doing quicker research, summaries of the text, with the respect of journalistic ethics and also the content of it. As I mentioned before, because it's just a prototype, we've been testing this only for 2 years. Idea of RSF and the alliance that is working with us on this, whenever we can secure bigger funding and partners around the world, we'd like also to test it in other environments, potentially also in Asia, where we could work with other NGOs or even media outlets themselves. Because when I'm saying that the sources included from the French press, for instance, AFP was one of the agencies that gets access to all the database so that this AI tool can build on that. So it was quite interesting. So we'll see how it will develop in the coming months or years, but the idea would be to engage as much as possible partners from the ground and really focus on what journalists want in the newsroom and not based on the AI tools that are available in the general market that very often don't work in respect of the journalistic ethics, and also can be seen as replacement maybe for journalists in the future. And this is something that was clear for us that media don't want at least in the coming period of time.
Well, Irene, is that true? Do journalists reject or maybe are slow to adopt or apprehensive about AI tools? I mean, especially for smaller independent outlets, I imagine tools like that have a huge potential to bring the costs down.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the willingness to adapt these tools really varies by country and context, if I can be completely frank about that. I think that we found that there is more resistance to adoption of these tools in markets like the United States and in some Western European countries. However, I actually just came back from the Nordic AI Media Summit, where it was incredible to see the adoption of AI tools in small and large newsrooms, and the level of collaboration around sharing of these tools and open sourcing. So I think it really depends on context. There are significant opportunities for these tools to allow smaller media to scale, also to allow underrepresented voices in society to begin to produce content that could be consumed by a broader audience. I think that there's incredible opportunities there. This is the good side of the tools and the journalism. I think that, of course, at the foundation is the ethics that are required about disclosure, about how they're being used, ensuring that there is a human in the loop and being intentional about where that human exists. And different organizations will have different comfort levels with that. Different types of journalism are better able to automate and use these tools. So for example, sports reporting, corporate reporting, things that are very data driven, you can actually use this to scale journalism quite quickly. For what we think of as kind of the highest level of journalism, the investigation, the uncovering hidden truths, that still requires a lot of human input. And yet, generative AI tools can help to parse huge data sets in the service of that kind of journalism too. So I would just say that there is no one answer about how this is going to be used or the future, but I think that at the core, these are tools that are going to be in service of the same kind of journalistic ethics and techniques that we have had from the very beginning. We will see more automation. There's no question about that. Whether that is for good or whether that is to the detriment of journalism, I think it remains to be seen.
Well, what a fascinating time to be a journalist and to be in the media. Thank you both so much for lending us your time and your expertise. Aleksandra Bielakowska, the Asia Pacific Advocacy Manager at RSF in Taipei, and Irene J. Liu, the AI Emerging Tech and Regulation Director at the International Fund for Public Interest Media, joining us from London. How much do you rely on AI tools to find out what's happening in the world? And how do you feel about journalists using AI for their research? Generate your answer or type it up the old-fashioned way in the comments section below. Click the video beside me for a discussion of media ownership, freedoms, and funding in the Asia-Pacific region. Subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell if you don't want to miss more stories on tech and finance from Taiwan.